Hi guys. So at this point, um, this would ordinarily be our last class. I'm going to divide it up. I know I've said this before. There's so much to cover in chapter 7, and there's a few things I want to hit in chapter 8. So I'm going to give you chapter 7 right now, and then I'll do a quick overview of chapter 8 in the next day or two. I know it's the end of the semester. You might or might not watch it, but I do want you to have the material in case you do. So a couple of other things. This weekend, on Saturday, I think it was, I emailed you a list of 20 terms. 20. 10, 10, 20, 20. 15 of those terms, 1-5, will definitely be on the final exam. I will choose another 15 that will be on the final exam. The quiz will be posted in Canvas 1 week from today, and you will have a couple of hours to complete the quiz. I forget if it's 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, you'll have a couple of hours to complete the quiz. It is important that you get it done on time because I am required to submit grades 24 hours after the final exam. So that's everything. So if you owe me work, you have to have it to me. You must, absolute must, have it to me by next Monday, or else I have to give you, I think it's a pass, fail, credit, no credit option. And then you'll have to work it out with the college as to how you handle that. That's the instructions I've been given. Your final paper is due today. That is Monday, May the 4th. So if you haven't gotten that to me, you really need to work on getting that to me. I've seen a couple of your papers come in. There's some of you, you're still owing me some other stuff from previous days. I did this weekend. I went through all of my email for the past couple of weeks, and anything that had been submitted to me except the final paper. A couple of you had already turned that in. So I went through and I graded, and everything that I believe I have is graded now. If you've sent me something and you look on Canvas and you say, I don't have a grade for this, I need you today, or some of you are not watching this, so I'm speaking to no one, I guess, but I need you today to look at Canvas, and if there's something that you believe you've turned in that I should have, I need you to tell me that you submitted it, send it to me again, so that I can double check that. Now, here's the thing. I've stopped putting discussion questions up. I've stopped. Last week, I don't even think I put up supplemental stuff, or maybe I did, but I'm trying to cut down on all of that because this is the end of semester. I know you're feeling a crunch with the way everything changed, so I'm trying to work with you to make this so that you can get it all done. So, if you've got a problem, you need to reach out to me, because 1 week from today, we're going to have to wrap this thing up. I know it's been a hard semester for some of you. It's been hard for me to get all adjusted to all of this. But that's the cards we're dealt. We're just going to have to deal with it. So today, I want to highlight a couple of things from chapter 7 because I think they're important for you to understand. One is called phenomenology. Phenomenology. We're going to look at that, especially Husserl and Heidegger. We're going to look at Jean-Paul Sartre and his version of existentialism. And then rather than taking a deep dive into structuralism and poststructuralism as presented by Saussure, Lévi-Strauss, and Lacan, I'm simply going to just present to you the ideas of structuralism and post-structuralism, so I'm not going to break it down in any particular way, because I think you can make the extrapolation, or I hope you can, at least at some point, if you go on to study and think about these sorts of things. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump both feet into phenomenology, and we're going to begin to, there we go. We're going to look at Husserl. So we're right now with Husserl and Lévi-Strauss, Heidegger, Lacan, Satre. We're talking more about what I called last week continental philosophy. When we talk about continental philosophy, we're talking about the continent of Europe. That is our shorthand way, because this is the environment where many of these ideas are being formed in the late 19th, early 20th century. America is still not doing much of its own philosophy, even at this point, although in the next chapter we will see a few American philosophers. You might have noticed I don't think we've touched on any American philosophers. This is the one area where the United States is really deficient in that sense. Now, we've certainly made up for that in recent years, but for the most part, the U.S. has not produced a lot of renowned philosophers with original thought. All right, so let's get into phenomenology. Phenomenology, if you just think about the term phenomena, it is usually something that you see. So phenomenology is primarily concerned with the idea of, or the study of, appearances. Remember, ology would be the study of phenomena, so the study of phenomena or the study of appearances. This is the study of lived experience. So the things that you actually experience in your life. It's concerned with the study of phenomena that arises from the experience of being in the world. So as you interact with the world, right now you're interacting with the world, and you see me through this digital image, and you see the things that are behind me right here. A drum from Africa, a menorah, a Buddha, a monstrance, diplomas on the wall, books on the shelves, things like that. So as you experience those, you are experiencing phenomena. So now we're going to talk about how you understand that. So phenomenology is going to juxtapose itself with Cartesian philosophy to some extent. So Descartes was primarily concerned with the mind. I think, therefore I am. And so the human mind became the measure of all things to some extent. So the very fact that you could conceive of it within your mind, then that became the measure of it. But phenomenology doesn't admit that. So for Descartes, emotions and senses were really not to be trusted. The outer reality is a separate and distinct entity that can only be understood in rational terms through cognitive processes of deduction. So emotions and senses can't be trusted, according to Cartesian philosophy. However, phenomenology seeks to understand the outside world as it is interpreted by and through human consciousness. So the fact that you're aware enough to be watching this, you're not only taking in my words and my facial expressions, but you're able to take in the environment that's surrounding me right now, and that is being also interpreted by the environment surrounding you. So you might be distracted by siblings or children or a spouse or something, or a partner or something like that. So all of that then goes into your consciousness as of right now. So phenomenology seeks to understand the outside world as it is interpreted by and through human consciousness. For Husserl, though we could understand thought that we could understand the world by applying intentionality. Intentionality. That is, directing one's focus to describe reality as one experiences it. So if you were to describe your reality right now, how would you describe it? I'm sitting in a room in front of a device that has an image of a professor, and I believe that professor is real because I remember seeing him in the classroom earlier this semester, so it must be reality, and he's speaking to me, and he's using my own language right now to describe the things that I'm supposed to be thinking, and now I'm thinking what he's describing, and God, it's getting a little freaky and weird. So you're being very intentional. You're directing your focus to describe the reality as you experience it. And so for Husserl, he thought that we must bracket then our biases and our preconceived notions. So for example, you might like me as a professor, but then when you read my shirt and you see that I ran a half marathon called the Hogsback Half, you might say, I don't like runners. But Husserl will say, no, let's bracket your biases and your preconceived notions. It's not just about that, by the way. I'm just using a very simple example. Let's lay all that to the side so that you can try to describe the reality that you're experiencing right now. And so he talked of this in terms of the epoch. And that has to do with here and now. And for Husserl, he thought that everything is always a description of now. Now. So when you describe the past, you're describing what was the now in the past. That's history. That was the now then. You can't really describe the now of the future because you're not there yet. So you're also not in the past. So there is no true understanding then of past or future. There's only and always the forever now. You live in the now. And it's all then about how you understand the now. Now, here's one thing that I'll say is that much of, or at least some of this, can get into very mystical. I don't want to say mystical because that gives the idea that it somehow is talking about a religious experience. But I do want to say that because some mystics, some meditation teachers, they focus on how to be present in the now, and that to really meditate and understand yourself, you have to situate yourself in the now, and you have to understand yourself in the now, and from that point of view. One such modern day thinker is Eckhart Tolle. I know it might be, is it backwards in the way you're looking at it? I never do remember if it's backwards or not. But Eckhart Tolle, in his book, Practicing the Power of Now, and there are others, Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan thinker, teacher, he talks about the naked now. It's always the focus on where you are in this moment. So for Husserl, you really can't understand anything if you're constantly trying to reconstruct the past or if you're worried about the future. And Husserl would say you have to focus on describing where you are right now. And how would you describe this now? So, in that sense, for example, you're never lost. You can never be lost because you are where you are and you cannot be anywhere else. You are forever and always in the now. Yes, even 20 minutes from now, you're going to be in the now then, but you can't conceive of that now yet because you're not there. You're in the now. Phenomenology can get way out there in philosophy. Well, there was another one who picked up on some of this, and his name was Martin Heidegger. Heidegger is perhaps the most difficult German philosopher, or you might even say philosopher of any place and time to understand. So I don't expect you, if you're having trouble with Husserl, I don't expect you necessarily to pick up Heidegger and be able to understand him easily anyway. But Heidegger picked up some of this, and he was a contemporary and student of Husserl, and he talked about how that consciousness is a product of the historical context from which it arises. So whereas Husserl wanted us to bracket our biases and presuppositions, Heidegger says that's not possible. Because to have consciousness, to have the ability to think now, it meant that we had to live through a series of nows. And that is our historical context. And we can't just bracket it, put it aside and not think about it or not have it influence how we're thinking about things right now. But he wanted to try to help understand the meaning of a person being in the world. That's what phenomenology is, the study of the appearances of things. So trying to understand the human in the world. And so for Heidegger, he thought that we had to truly grasp and understand the fact that we are a series of historical events and contexts. So understanding that, that brings us to where we are in the now. Now, Heidegger would not say that we can take that into the future, but he would say we can't because all of those things have given us our biases and our suppositions, and so that when we arrive at the now, we are loaded to bear with all of that. And so things or reality cannot be separated from their context. Our understanding, our very understanding, arises from interaction of reality and consciousness. Our understanding arises from the interaction of reality and our consciousness. So Heidegger then, there are essentially 3 points to Heidegger that I would point out for you. And again, Heidegger is very difficult to understand, so I'm not going to dive into this too deeply, but I do want you to get some of the points. Heidegger said that we had, so one of his criticisms, Heidegger, by the way, was somewhat of a hermit. He lived off in a cabin in the woods by himself, and it seems like almost every answer came back to spending time alone for Heidegger, either walking in the forest or walking in a cemetery. In fact, one time Heidegger was asked, how are we to live our lives? And Heidegger says, well, we should all try to spend more time in graveyards. That'll make more sense in just a moment. But Heidegger's first point was that he said that we have forgotten to notice we are alive. We've forgotten to notice that we are alive. we aren't in touch with our Das Sein, as he called it in German. We aren't in touch with our being. We wake up in the morning. We grope for the coffee. We maybe cobble together some type of breakfast. We'll flip on the television and become consumers of maybe the morning news or something else. Or we'll scroll through our Facebook feed or our Instagram feed. We'll look at all of these things. And at some point, we'll drag ourselves back to our bedroom where we get dressed, or maybe crawl back into bed as the days lately might be, or whatever it is. Maybe at some point, we'll pull ourselves up out of bed, eat again, just to maintain so that we can just do all this all over again. Maybe if we're fortunate, go for a walk, talk to someone, go about our day, or watch a philosophy lecture. But Heidegger would have said, you're just doing all that out of instinct, out of a reaction. You only eat and wake up to eat and wake up. You're not really paying attention to your being. You're not really being aware of the fact that you're alive and living your life then aware and conscious. You're not making connections with all the things in the past and the reality in which you're currently engaged to realize that you're alive and then therefore filled with lots of potential as to what you can do. Heidegger then went on to say that all being is connected. And this is something else that we tend to lose connection, or we tend to lose awareness of, that all being is connected. And this is very, very Buddhist of Heidegger to think of this, and we have no reason to think that he was trying to be Buddhist in this, but nevertheless, he talks about how that all life, all being is connected. We treat ourselves, we treat others as a means rather than an ends. So to treat someone as a means, by definition, is we use them to get something out of them. The most obvious example is, we had parents or some guardians who took care of us. It's probably only later in life that we come to appreciate them as the people they are and as individuals with lives that are significant for us. Because for most of our childhood and adolescence, they're just the means to provide us with food, shelter, clothing, an education, safety, all of those sorts of things. And so we treat others as means without realizing that we're connected to them in more significant and meaningful ways. And so Heidegger said we must be intentional about noticing others and to notice the unity of being. So the very fact that we're in this student-teacher relationship is one thing, but Heidegger would say we're also in other types of connections, and we must then recognize the unity of our being, and all being. There's a saying I'm vaguely remembering, that when the butterfly flaps its wing, the wind blows. And so the very movement of the butterfly then, of course, we know that the butterfly doesn't cause the wind, but the idea that then everything is connected as the butterfly flaps its wings. So we must be then aware and intentional about that connection that we have. And if the way to do that, the way to truly understand that, is to become more caring for each other. And if we become more caring, we free ourselves from this danger of nothingness and this forgetfulness of our connection, this amnesia of our connectedness. So Heidegger, number one, he says we've forgotten to notice we are alive. Number two, we forget that we're all connected. And number three, he says we forget that we are free. We forget that we are free. We have forgotten that we are actually alive. We have forgotten that we are connected, and we have forgotten that we are actually free. Free for what? Free to live for ourselves and as ourselves. He says that we are thrown into this world at birth, and we're narrowly defined by our culture, our nation, our family, our social rules. And by culture, we mean our social biases and prejudices. So when you're birthed from your mother, then you're birthed into a particular context and nation and family, and all the rules and trappings that come with that, and the biases and prejudices. And he says that we have forgotten then, because we're so bound by all of that we're actually free. We need to recognize our provincial perspective. In other words, how local our perspective is, how bound by our culture, our biases, our nation, our family, our social rules, mores. We need to realize how provincial our perspective is, and we need to rise above it to see the world, to see the world as it can be. If we do this, then we actually become authentic rather than inauthentic. We become authentic rather than inauthentic. So to break out of, well, let me give you my own example. I've told you before, I grew up in the Deep South in Mississippi. I'm not exaggerating that when anything happens north of the Mason-Dixon line, that my family calls to say, were you there when that happened? I even had a friend, a very well-educated friend from Mississippi. I saw her back in January when I went down for a visit. And her daughter is moving to Virginia. And so she and I have been in contact a little bit since then. And her daughter's moving to Virginia. She said, "We're going to be moving my daughter up there in a couple of weeks." This was a couple of weeks ago. And she said, "Is that near you?" And I had to email her back, and I had to say, that's 7 or 8 hours away. That's not really close. When I lived in Mississippi, I had a very narrow understanding of the world. I grew up in a very conservative religious tradition, in a very racist environment, in the subculture of the Deep South. It was only after, when I was about 15 years old, that I traveled to Ecuador, 16 or 17 when I traveled to Brazil, 21 years old when I moved to Tennessee, and as I began to work in a prison, and all the other experiences that I've had, that I realized how provincial, how local, how bound that my perspective actually was. And I think that now I'm living more of an authentic life than I ever have. And it's taken a lot of pain and difficulty to get here, to live this authentic life where I'm genuinely happy with myself. It's taken nearly 50 years of my life. And the thing about it is, here's the amazing thing, is that every time I thought I had reached a plateau where I would be happy, I realized that there was something more than that. And so I wanted more than that. And then once I achieved that, it wasn't that I wanted things. As far as possessions, most of my possessions are books in this world. But my perspective, my understanding has been enlarged time and time again. Every time I thought it can't get any larger, I realized that there are new doorways to open. And Heidegger would say that if you're able to do that, then you're able to live authentically, and you're able to live really for who and what you are. Too often we are they self. This is what Heidegger said. We are they self, they meaning others, rather than our self. Now that's important. Think about that for a minute. Too often we are they self and not our self. So how we are is defined by them, by they, rather than defined by who we are. Heidegger thought that the main way to really do this is to focus on our death. Literally, focus on your death. We realize no one can save us from the nothingness that we experience except us. So we should stop worrying about what others think of us and stop trying to impress them and enlarge our own boundaries, enlarge our own view. And that's why Heidegger said if we thought about our own death more, we would be able to understand ourselves and the finite boundaries that are placed upon us and how inauthentic all of that is. So that's why he said, if we really want to live, we should spend more time in cemeteries or graveyards. All right, so another continental philosopher that I want to talk about is Sartre. My dissertation was, I think I've mentioned it before in this class, my dissertation was on Playboy, not Playboy in general. It was on a specific topic in Playboy, and Sartre was one of the interviews I really wanted to look at in Playboy, but I just didn't have time in my dissertation to get to that. So Sartre now goes back to Soren Kierkegaard and the idea of existentialism. And remember, existentialism is talking about your existence, your being. And so Sartre then also has about 4 points that we can lay out to understand him. And his most famous work, and Sartre, by the way, he was a playwright. He just did lots of things in addition to philosophy. And that's one of the reasons why he became, that Hugh Hefner became interested and wanted to interview him. In fact, Sartre actually had an FBI file on him. The FBI was studying him because they became threatened by him. I'll say more about that in just a moment. So one of Sartre's most famous works is Being and Nothingness. And so the first point that we can kind of take away from Sartre is that things are stranger than we realize. Things are stranger than we realize. We don't understand the mysterious connections and contradictions in our life and the absurdity of the world. We just don't comprehend it. We think we do, but we actually don't. In my own life, if I think, as I was just using the example, coming from where I did in Mississippi, that I would be living in, the area of New Jersey. I never said I wanted to live in New Jersey. If I had thought back when I was 16, 17 years old and I wanted to drop out of high school, I didn't want to deal with that anymore. But to think nowadays that not only would I have multiple graduate degrees, but I would be teaching philosophy and ethics and world religions, and that I would be living a life that I enjoy so much, I would never have realized how to get from point A, the 15-year-old in Mississippi, to where I am today, whatever point along this journey of life you might want to. It's been absurd. It's absolutely been absurd. If I told you my life story, you would say it's absurd. And that's what Sartre says, that life is more absurd than what we realize. The world is absurd. And the realization of how much we don't understand, we really don't understand, is key to that. To be aware of existence when it's been stripped of its prejudices and biases and its stabilizing influences by daily life. Then we can begin to live. Now, Sartre doesn't say this, but I looked this up just to be sure I was right about it. So there's this phenomena called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect says that some people are so stupid they don't realize how stupid they are. Now, Sartre probably would not have said that, although he might have. He was pretty blunt sometimes. But basically, I think that's what Sartre is saying. Much like what Husserl and Heidegger might have said, we don't realize the potential of our lives. And so Sartre would have said, we don't realize how absurd this world is. We're ignorant. We're ignorant to its absurdity. And the next thing that Heidegger would have said, and here again it connects to what we were just talking about, Heidegger would have said that we need to realize that we are free. We are free. We have an abundance of liberty. Things don't have to be the way they are. They don't have to be the way they are. You can change your reality. Anything is possible because nothing is preordained by God. We make it up as we go along. Again, take my life as an example. I certainly didn't know this is where I would end. I don't know where, I'm already thinking that, for my actual career, I could probably retire in about 10, 12 years. And I'm already thinking I could have a whole nother second career. What do I want to train for? I still want to teach. I still want to do what I do, but maybe I want to do something else because I'll still be a relatively young man. We can make this life up as we go along because we have that liberty. We are free. The third thing that we learn from Sartre is that we shouldn't live in what he called bad faith. Bad faith, according to Sartre, was to live without taking our liberty seriously. So if you continue to live a life that's defined by being from Flemington and I'll never be anything but from Flemington and do this, or I'm from Bridgewater and I'll never do anything, or I'm from Martinsville and I'll never do anything else, or wherever it is you're from, and you think this is my life and this is what I'm consigned to, then Sartre would have said you're living in bad faith. You're living in bad faith. To live in bad faith is when we live without taking our liberties seriously. We live in bad faith when we willfully ignore the other options we have to our life. And so Sartre used the illustration of a waiter. Sartre lived in Paris, and he, of course, if you've been to Paris, you go to cafes all the time. You never eat at home. You eat in the cafe. And then you don't eat very much. You eat a baguette and some coffee or some tea or something like that, or drink some wine and a baguette, and that's what you have. Wonderful pastries, by the way. But Sartre used the illustration of a waiter. And he was watching a particular waiter who just really took his job as a waiter very seriously. Anything else I can get for you, madame? Ah, monsieur, anything for you? What more can I? And, un garçon, which in French means boy. And so he just assumed his name was garçon. And he took that so seriously, not realizing that he could be anything else in the world that he wanted to be. Not that there was anything wrong with being a waiter. Be a waiter by all means, but realize that you can be anything else. If being a waiter is what you want to be after you've considered everything else that you can be, then you are being a waiter in good faith. You're living in good faith. But if you haven't considered all the other things that you can do, the ways that you can live, then you're living in bad faith. The fourth thing that we learn from Sartre is that we can dismantle capitalism. Sartre was not a fan of capitalism. In fact, he was very much a fan of Marx, and this is where he got in trouble with the FBI. He was worried that money was driving our decisions. Decisions about, think about this, does money drive your decisions? Where you live, who you live with, what you do, what you think you can do in your life. Does money drive that? And the answer is, yeah, probably. Probably it does. And so Sartre believed that we were then slaves. Slaves then to money, to capitalism, because money then defined so much of our lives and forced us then to deny our freedom. And so he very much embraced Marxist philosophy, and he supported communism, even going to Cuba at one point to visit Castro and others he supported. And so it's because of that the FBI picked up on this and studied him. It was also partly the reason why Hugh Hefner thought he was fascinating. So Sartre thought that we could dismantle capitalism, and if we had dismantled capitalism, we would have been able to live much freer lives. That's one of the things that Marx, remember, had taught, is that if we could share the wealth in such a way that we would all have a freedom to enjoy life in new ways. So if you wanted to be a painter, you could be a painter, and you wouldn't be just predetermined to do whatever it is that you have to do. Now, in the last few minutes that I have your attention, you see why there's so much to cover here, because I'm not even going to cover everyone. But I'm going to talk a little bit about structuralism and post-structuralism. And this is where it's Saussure, Lévi-Strauss, and Lacan. I'm not going to get into them specifically. I just want to talk about structuralism and post-structuralism in general terms. If you want to read about them specifically, you can. So structuralism, then, believed in a fixed real world, and a reality that was fixed and real. And then that our ideas rest on material relationships, human relationships, social and economic. And that in truth, our reality is a combination of those three. So our human, our social, our economic relationships. So the ideas that we have, they rest on material relations of human, social, and economic, and a combination of those three. And there is a system that exists that gives meaning for most individuals. There is a structure that gives meaning to most individuals' lives. And these systems or these structures place limits on truth, thought, and meaning. So because we're bound within these structural concepts for our reality, they limit what truth we can really understand, what thoughts we can really have, and the meaning that we can really find in life. And so structuralists then would have believed that there exists universal truths that are out there that we can attain and that which guide then our lives. And there are then these structures that then direct how our lives are going to be. Some are positive, some are negative. So structures like church, family, are positive influences that affect our life, or religion, you might say, in our family. But then there are those others that are police and military that might also direct our lives. And structure, they provide then structure of how we think as individuals, regardless of our class, our age, our gender, our sexuality. Now, juxtapose that then to post-structuralism. And whereas the structuralists believed in a fixed real world, post-structuralists doubted that there was an absolute reality and a fixed world of any type. Our ideas then depend upon constructed discourse in a society, i.e. the way we speak and respond to each other. So the way that we communicate with each other then constructs our ideas about what is real. So, looks like a salt shaker, doesn't it? Nope. It's a Mars capsule. Did you see it? See it? Yeah. See? Now I've just changed the way you understand. No, it's a lunar capsule, I should have said. It's a lunar capsule. So now I've changed the conversation that we're having. I've changed your idea of it. Another lunar capsule. You think it's pepper? Nope. Different lunar capsule. We got them both. So how we communicate with each other, how we speak and how we respond then, shapes our understanding of our ideas and therefore shapes our reality. So we can doubt that there is any absolute reality. Excuse me. So whereas the structuralists would have believed that there is an absolute truth out there, the post-structuralists would have said, maybe there is an absolute truth, but it doesn't mean that we can know it. If it exists, we may never know it. So rather, we will then believe that there are multiple truths that exist, and therefore we will embrace the ambiguity and the uncertainty that exist in the world. Meaning, then, is forever shifting. So you can't pinpoint meaning. So as media then presents reality to us, or whatever they think is reality, through art, through music, or whatever media that it might be, it possesses multiple meanings. So the images that we see, polar bear, maybe? The way that we understand then that image, that media, this is media here, polar bear, polar, seltzer, that depends on the intent of the creator, the person who designed this outside of this can, and how you receive it. So you recognize that as a polar bear, maybe because you saw a polar bear at the zoo, the aquarium or something, maybe. And so then your reality then is between the creator and your reception by the audience. Differences then among social and cultural phenomena can be analyzed and observed. So differences between social and cultural phenomena can be analyzed and observed, which then out of this comes an understanding of, this is a big word, hegemony. 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 And hegemony is leadership or dominance of one culture or nation over others. So hegemony then. So as we begin to understand our differences in society and cultural phenomena, and we began to understand that, and we understand that, you know, somebody in Africa, my friends in Sudan, they would not understand what that is. They might think it's a dog or something on that can. They would wonder, why is there a dog on that can? They've never seen a polar bear. They know nothing about polar bears. Polar bears can exist as far as they're concerned. They're in Africa, in Sudan. Never seen it. Probably never even in a book. But the very fact that they would probably have polar seltzer brought in, then a very Western American item, we're then, as the U.S., as a Western culture, exerting influence and dominance over them. And so we then become a hegemonic force. Hold on just a second. We then become a hegemonic force. The U.S. is one of the most prominent hegemonic forces in the world. When you go anywhere in the world, I've visited 5 out of the 7 continents and have no desire to go to Antarctica. I do want to go to Australia and New Zealand, though. You will find the influence of America all over the place. Now, one final topic to cover today, before we wrap this up. and that is deconstruction. Deconstruction is most widely understood as a literary analysis. I should probably say a mediated analysis. So any media, it doesn't have to be a book. It can be any media. So television, movies, film, the news that you see in the evening, any media, even the text messages that you get and send and receive with people, that is media. And so deconstruction then has to do with how we analyze that. The traditional questions is we might ask is where the meaning is located in communication. Where is the meaning located? So is the meaning then that we bring to an item? I'm just going to use books for this, okay? It can go for anything, but I'm just going to use books for this. So the meaning then of this book, is it in Eckhart Tolle, who wrote it? Is the meaning located within the text itself? Or does meaning come as I, the reader, consume it? Where is the meaning found? Well, deconstruction says baloney to all of it. There's no meaning in the writer, Eckhart Tolle. There's no reading in the actual pages. They're just letters, squiggly things on a page. And in whatever it is that I think I read there. So deconstruction denies the meaning. Any text loses its meaning if it's examined closely. It falls apart. Now, we might perceive meaning in a text, but it falls apart if we examine it closely. There might be a meaning, but that doesn't mean we can find it. So, we take the very title of the book, Practicing the Power of Now. So let's deconstruct those words right there. This is what deconstruction would do. Practicing. What does it mean to practice? How do you practice? Practice is to do something over and over and over and over again. But practice the power of now? How can you do now over and over again? Now is now or now is then? Now in the past or now in the future? Which now are you talking about? How can you practice now? Because every time I think I've got now down pat, the now has gone. And there's another now. So I can't practice that now because that now is gone. So when I'm practicing the now in the future, I can't practice the now in the future because it's not here yet. So what the hell are you talking about practicing the presence of now or the power of now? There's no way to do that. And power? Power in now? Right now? I can do nothing. Nothing. I have no power right now. So there we begin to deconstruct then the words that are there. But you can do this with anything. You can do this with a movie. You can do this with any media. So although we perceive meaning in a text, it falls apart. I cannot perfectly then communicate what I'm saying to you in language. So even though you think you understand, I can't be certain that you understand what I'm saying. So all attempts to communicate ultimately fail. We have to constantly modify and modify and modify our language to focus more narrowly our meaning. But we can never be certain that what I think in my mind and speak with my mouth, you're able to take in with your ears and process with your mind. Sure, you might repeat the words, drum. But when I say drum, you might think of brake drums. Very different type of drums, are they not? For those of you who don't know, yes, they are. You don't pound on brake drums like that one. So then I can never be certain that what I consciously think of and what I process through my mind and then speak with my mouth and it goes into your ears and you process with your, I can't be certain unless I say, well, you know, a drum, what I'm talking about is this cylinder type of thing. And you might say, cylinder, what? That's a cylinder right there. Is that what you're talking about? No. I mean, it could be something like that, but no, it's bigger. It's hollow. It's hollow like a log. Well, you could use a log, but then it has skin. Human skin? No, not human skin. Although you could use human skin, but here we're talking about something like deer skin. Oh, you're going to kill a deer. Poor little Bambi. Why are you going to do that to Bambi? Oh, I didn't kill a deer. Then what kind of skin are you going to use? I don't know. So I can never be certain. I have to modify my language continually to try to focus then what it is I'm trying to say. So deconstruction points out the flaws in our communication. So it's a very critical, highly analytical and critical sort of practice because it focuses on the absence of things. The absence of a true definition of a thing. To begin deconstruction, you must first think that you found a meaning to begin to dismantle it and to identify the tensions and how the resolution to those begins to break down. What do you mean practicing the power of now? That's baloney. All right, gang, that's where I'm going to stop for today. I will try to hit some highlights on the last chapter. Needless to say, not much of the last chapter is going to be on the final exam. You should have gotten those 20 terms, 15 on the final quiz. The quiz will be open next Monday. I will email you more instructions as we get closer to the date. I'm going to be working on your papers. Give me your final paper. Any work that you owe me, get it to me. Got to have it. So I can grade it. I can get a grade in for you. Unless you don't care, in which case, can't make you care. All right, guys. Have a good day, and hope to see you again soon.